Welcome to the voice of St. Anthony Parish from Allston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL, 950 AM, 100.3 FM. And you can also hear us at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. And we're here every single Monday through Friday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm coming from St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. So if you're looking for a place to go to church, because you don't have one right now, and you're a Catholic, you'd like to go experience a Catholic church, Catholic Mass, or for that matter, if you are not Catholic but want to come to experience a Catholic Mass, do keep that in mind. You have a standing invitation to the 10 o'clock a.m. Mass on Sundays. So one of the things we're looking at this week is something I think that really has to be addressed within the Catholic community. And that is an understanding of how we live our Catholic faith in light of what we would call the rules. And I think it's a real problem in our Catholic faith today, where there are certain people that have such a strong interpretation of the rules, they basically undermine what our faith is all about. So let me give you an example. One of the things that we can see quite often in a lot of readings, and this is actually one of the things that popped into my mind because I heard this at a reading recently, and not a reading, at a Mass recently. It was one of the readings. It was the second reading, and it's come up in a few other places. And I said, well, maybe that's God's way of saying, I'd like you to address this. And it's 1 Corinthians 13. And those of you who are quite familiar with that passage know that this is where St. Paul talks about love. And he says those famous words where if what we are doing is not in love, then what we're doing is a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. And he says it doesn't matter. You can turn your body over to be burned and sacrifice for what you believe in. But if you're not doing it in love, it's just this noisy gong and this clanging cymbal. So in other words, it's this annoying sound, which is a fancy way of saying that. And the symbol, of course, was Cymbal. Well, think of that. What does a cymbal sound like when it's on a drum set, but it isn't well, or the type of playing isn't what you like to hear? It's annoying. Reminds me of a time of someone explained this very well. He happened to be sitting someplace. I think he was in a dinner theater or something, and there was a jazz band there. He was with a whole bunch of people, and he must have been sitting too close to the drums. And he said, it was driving me crazy. I want to yell at the guy, use the brushes, because the noise was so loud on the cymbals. Just use the brushes and on the cymbals and the drums. So yeah, this is what St. Paul is talking about. Although it may seem like you're doing a heroic act, what you're doing is an irritating act, is irritating to the ears. And so it's a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. And this is a powerful reality where he's trying to illustrate that everything we do has to be done in love, which, obviously this is something we're working towards all the time. So we have to be people of prayer. We have to be people who pray, and we have to be people of prayer. Praying and worshiping and serving the Lord. But in our prayer, it helps us to do the things we're called to do. Yet, there are these people that we're seeing in many circles of the Catholicism that are so rooted in what they consider these rules that what they're doing is they're just becoming so rigid. This is what the Pope is speaking about. And the problem is not the rigidity to the rules, it's the lack of love in leading others to know the rules. This is a real problem. Let me give you a good example, because it just came out of the Philippines. Every country has what is known as their bishop's conference. So, for example, at the daily Mass here at St. Anthony in Alston, we say a prayer for the upcoming Synod of Synodality, which will be starting in October. And that comes to us from the Brazilian bishops, because I've yet to see one from the American bishops. There might be one, and if anyone, even if an American bishop happens to be listening to this and saying, yeah, we have a prayer for that, please send it to us. You can find a way to send it to us through CatholicAudiomedia.com. But I haven't seen any prayer for the Synod of Synodality. So the Bishops' Conference in Brazil has a prayer that we say at our parish. Obviously, I translated it into English, at our parish. Well, in light of that, interesting instruction came out of the bishops of the Philippines, and it doesn't necessarily apply depending on the instruction, but this one does. It applies to the whole church. And I'm going to talk to you about what all that is on the other side of the break. You're listening to the voice of St. Anthony Parish in Alston, Massachusetts, right here on WROL 950 AM 100.3 FM. Don't forget to tell others where they can find our program. You can hear us on WROL 950 AM and WROLradio.com at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday through Friday. We then podcast the program on your favorite podcast platform and at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also hear us at our parish website, that's St. AnthonyAlston.org. That is StAnthonyAlston.org. Let others know where you can find us and spread the word about the Catholic Audio Media podcast. Well, we're back, and we wanted to talk about this instruction that came out of the Bishops' Conference in the Philippines. So one of the things that if you go into a Catholic Mass, you may notice that some people stand and pray the Our Father, and they have their hands out with their palms up flat in front of them, and that is called the orans position. And what it means is to similar, not exact, but similar to the same position that the priest uses when he is praying at the altar. Well, there is a whole bunch of people who take a very rigid understanding of how we are supposed to pray, and they say, you cannot do this. And they'll write this in different instructions. You can't do this. These are lay people. These aren't necessarily priests or bishops or anyone else. These are people who will say, you can't do that. Only the priest can be like this. And it's a very rigid and strong interpretation. Well, the Philippine Bishops Conference just basically came out, and apparently that question has been brought to them. And they said they've done this little study, and they've found there is nothing in the church that tells you how you have to stand when praying the Our Father. Therefore, then they added that we all pray the Our Father at the Mass. Why? Because it is the prayer of the people of the church. So all of us pray the Our Father. And so what the Philippine bishops say, in light of that, if someone wants to pray in this orans position, which is standing up, you're holding your hands out flat in front of you, similar to how the priest, not exact, but similar to how the priest prays at the altar, they said that this is perfectly acceptable. It's not required. People can stand in a different way if they want, but it's perfectly acceptable because there is no official church teaching of how you're supposed to stand when praying the Our Father. Therefore, there's no instruction that says you shouldn't do that, and there's no instruction that says you should. And understand that there have been a lot of people that have been saying this is something over the years that people should not be standing like that. Why they've been saying that, I don't know. I know that for a time in my life, before obviously I was a priest, I used to pray in that way when I was praying the Our Father during Mass. So we are looking at that, and the bishops are saying, no, that is a rigid position that people are holding, that you can't stand like that when praying the Our Father, and it's wrong. It's incorrect. Wrong isn't, better to say incorrect, to teach people they can't be like that. So it's a fascinating reality. And what is it that we're bringing in? We're bringing in, if someone wants to pray the Our Father that way, that's perfectly acceptable. And the warning is, if we have people who are maintaining a very rigid understanding of the rules, so rigid that they demand that these rules be followed in a certain way, when in fact it has been consistently the message of the church that we encourage people to, one, understand the spirit of the rules, so the spirit of the law, before they understand the letter of the law, and to follow the spirit of the law, which usually is a higher standard, but to teach them in a way that is pastorally acceptable, which means to teach them as you would someone who you really cared about, which brings us back to, if we don't teach people in love, then what are we? We are a noisy gong and a clanging cymbal. What does it sound like? You can't do that. You can't stand like that. That's not right. No. And there's no love in that statement. It's actually the Philippine bishop saying there is no instruction on how to do this. And if someone wants to stand like that, that's perfectly acceptable. We're going to talk more tomorrow. In the meantime, have yourself a blessed day. I want to call your attention to Catholic TV, which offers great faith-filled, family-friendly programming 24 hours a day. You can find your cable channel at www.getcatholictv.com, and you can watch online on the free apps or check out the YouTube channel. Daily Mass, Rosaries, the Divine Mercy Chaplet, and the Our Lady of Perpetual Help Novena are all available online and on demand. Check out CatholicTV.com. If you would like to support our program, please consider a donation to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts. There are several ways to consider this. One is to purchase any of our merchandise, which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. That's CatholicAudiomedia.com. There are coffee mugs there. There's also my latest book, Encounter Christ in Your Humanity, all of which you can find at the shopping tab at CatholicAudiomedia.com. You can also donate to the show directly through either the Donate tab, also at CatholicAudiomedia.com, or by sending a donation through the U.S. Postal Service with your questions and comments at 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. That's St. Anthony Parish, 43 Holton Street, Allston, Massachusetts, 02134. Finally, the best way you can support our parish is to attend Mass on Sundays at 10 o'clock and be a part of our parish. We thank you for any support you would like to give to St. Anthony Parish in Allston, Massachusetts, the sponsoring parish for this media outreach to Catholics and other Christians in the WROL, WEZE, and podcast listening audience. In Cristo vivimos.